Hi, Stacy. How are you?
I'm great, Allie. How are you?
Good. Were you able to enjoy the amazing weather we had this weekend?
I was. This time I had no complaints. The weather was good, a bit hot, but generally pretty good.
Good, good. Hi, everyone. I see people joining. If you're new, we'd love to hear where you're joining us from because last week we were definitely California dreaming.
Yes, yes, yes. Is it, although I read that it's supposed to be raining this week though, right, Allie? I mean, I like rain, so I'm not going to complain. It's more the confusing nature of Arkansas weather that I struggle with because I love rain, generally okay with heat, but it's like that you can experience 4 seasons in a week in Northwest Arkansas that really throws me off.
Yes, you definitely can. Yeah, I'm definitely getting used to it, but I've enjoyed the rain because it's made everything so green.
Yes, that's true. And Allie, for those of you guys who are new and maybe haven't heard yet, Allie joins us. Well, she's here in Arkansas, but she lived in California for a long time.
I
Do you
did.
miss that temperate weather, Allie?
I really do. I miss the beach too. There are no beaches in Arkansas, so we are definitely landlocked.
You can just go to Lake Fayetteville, Allie. Same thing.
No, I'm just gonna get the Waltons to build us a beach.
Now we're thinking. Now
Yeah.
we're thinking.
I see Diane's joining us from Minnesota. Also love Minnesota. I've only been in the summer though, so that might be biased.
Slightly biased answer.
Yeah. Well, we'll let people join a little bit, but we can go ahead and get started with the introduction.
Yeah.
As Stacy said before, my name is Allie Trong. I'm the content coordinator here at SupplyPike. And if you've been joining us for a while, you know Stacy. She's the glue that holds these webinars all together. She's got 10 plus years of supplier, Walmart knowledge, and I just have learned so much from her every time we come on here. But today we are in the third part of our Ultimate OTIF series, and we're talking about responding to charges. So we're going to walk through some best practices and holding third parties accountable. We'll talk about the response portion, how SQEP fits into OTIF chargebacks, and then we'll be able to get to your questions. And we're going to do a bonus demo. Just a couple housekeeping things. We always send out the deck, and there will always be a recording of today's webinar, and that usually comes out in 1 to 2 business days. We're going to answer questions at the end, but go ahead and put them in the Q&A box so we can answer those as we're going. Stacy, am I missing anything?
I don't think so. I think we're ready to get this party started.
Sweet, then I'll hand it off to you.
Awesome. OTIF party. Ain't no party like an OTIF party.
That's real.
Well, no, the other half of that is because an OTIF party don't stop. No, we don't want any more OTIF funds. Okay, yeah. Welcome to SupplyPike. We tell really cheesy jokes here. It's fine. Yeah, so thank you so much, Allie. To those of you guys who have been with us for a long time, I'm usually kind of co-hosting with Melody, but Allie has come on to the SupplyPike team earlier this year, and she and Melody will be trading off on the awesome co-hosting and moderating duties, and Allie is amazing. She asks hilarious questions at the beginning of every webinar, so you need to make sure you tune in just for those. But really quickly, we always like to start off our webinars with a very short introduction to who SupplyPike is, especially for our newer folks. If this is your first time joining, welcome. So we are a Northwest Arkansas based software company. And what we do is we create cloud-based tools to help our CPG teams maximize their cash flow. And we really do this in a couple of different ways, mainly through the apps that we create. One of them is called Retail Intelligence, and that is around sales and replenishment reporting. Another one is called Deductions Navigator. It's one of our most popular apps. We help you to fight invalid deductions at retailers with just 1 click, and at some retailers, 0 clicks. We've actually completely automated the process, which is amazing. And then the last app we have is OTIF Radar, which is, of course, as you guys can imagine, really focused around helping you to diagnose the root cause of your on-time in full issues at Walmart, and then also fighting those pesky OTIF fines. So we work with over 200 different companies representing about $25 billion in retail impact. Just so you guys know, we started off working with Walmart and Sam's Club. Of course, we're in Northwest Arkansas, right in their backyard. But late last year, we launched in Kroger. We will be launching in Target next week, which is really exciting. So if that sounds interesting to you guys, definitely pay attention. And then we have plans to launch into Amazon later on this year. So we are slowly growing our retail footprint. We're really excited about that. Across the screen, I say this every webinar, but these are just a few of the brands that we are so proud to consider part of the SupplyPike family. And hopefully one day we will be able to add your brand as well. All right, so as Ali mentioned, we are kind of in part 3 of our OTIF series, and really what we are hoping to accomplish today is to give you guys best practices for OTIF compliance, and also really just help you figure out how to respond to OTIF fines, kind of what the processes and procedures are, again, kind of best practices to make sure you're able to maximize your chance at winning those OTIF fines back, and all of that good stuff. So we always like to start again, kind of just level setting and making sure that everyone is on the same page on what the best practices for OTIF compliance are. And a big reason for that is, and you'll hear us say this kind of throughout today's webinar, is the best kind of offense when it comes to OTIF is defense. It is challenging, as I'm sure many of you guys know, if you have worked with Walmart for a while, to win money back for whatever reason, be it deductions or OTIF or SQEP. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of sharing the best practices to help you prevent the receiving OTIF fines at all to begin with. So we'll be covering, again, just the basics of how you can make sure that you're, on time as a prepaid and collect supplier. Best practices around filling, 98% of all ordered cases, that in full component, and then also best practices around PO cancellation as well as submitting tickets. So we covered this in our previous webinars, but again, this is just a really nice refresher for all of the different components of OTIF. So the first one that we're going to talk about is how to make sure you are prepaid on time. So quick refresher on this: being a prepaid supplier means that you are responsible for getting your product to the Walmart DCs. So you basically have ownership of the product, you contract with a carrier, and then Walmart takes possession of the goods once it lands in their DCs. So how to be prepaid on time, here are a couple of really key things that you need to know. Number one is know your delivery window. So we covered this in the last webinar, but different departments, different modes of transportation, different fulfillment centers and DCs have different delivery windows for suppliers. So for some of them, it's on the MABD itself, or the must arrive by date itself. For example, if you're a grocery supplier, MABD 11 to 11 window is very common. If you're a gen merch supplier, typically speaking, it's going to be MABD -2. So you have basically 2 days prior to the MABD up to the MABD itself. As long as you deliver within this window, you're going to be okay. You're considered prepaid on time. So make sure you know what your delivery window is. And if you are not sure what that is, you can always check out our last webinar. It's free. It's on the Supplier Wiki website. And there's a slide in there that actually lays out kind of all the different delivery windows. Once you know what your delivery window is, then it's definitely imperative that you communicate those requirements and expectations with the third-party carriers that you work with. So generally speaking, if you're going to be working with some of the bigger guys out there, the ODFLs and CH Robinsons of the world, they're going to know what those delivery windows are because they do a lot of business with Walmart. But this is really, really important if you're kind of working with these smaller shops that may be regional or maybe are just kind of mom and pop type shops. They may not necessarily know what Walmart's requirements are. So you want to make sure that you are always sharing that with them to make sure that they are, basically able to be compliant with Walmart's expectations. You want to make sure, of course, that you're creating a process for delivering on time. So, making sure that you are scheduling those delivery appointments, making sure that your product is ready to go on an as needed basis. And again, making sure that you're just in constant communication with your carrier teams so that, again, they're delivering prepaid on time. And then from there, it's really important not only to kind of have the process established, but also have checks and balances for that process. So are you utilizing data to kind of evaluate the different third parties that you work with? Are you sharing that performance information with them so that you can identify gaps? One thing that is kind of key for prepaid suppliers is that even though your carriers are the one responsible for kind of scheduling those appointments and getting the product within the delivery window, if you are outside that prepaid on time window, Walmart finds you, not them. So it's really important that you're always having this back and forth communication with your teams so that, if you are doing everything right as a supplier and the carrier is delivering outside the window or not scheduling appointments or whatever it is, you can share that information with them and go, this is not quite what we expected it to be. These are again are Walmart's expectations. And as a result of you not hitting these, we're getting fines, and these are the different remedies that we're wanting to pursue with you. So that is on the prepaid on time side. For the collect ready side, and keep in mind too, that there's a collect ready piece and there's a collect on time piece. If you are a collect supplier, meaning Walmart backs up their fleet to your warehouse to pick up product, they take possession at your warehouse. You are not responsible for the collect on time piece. So Walmart still measures that. But because it is Walmart's fleet that it is delivering to the Walmart DCs, even if they are delivering outside of that window, you have no say in that. You have no control over it. And so like I said, Walmart will still keep track of the score, but you are not going to be liable for fines if you are not collect on time. Now, what you are responsible for is the collect ready piece. And so as you can imagine, because Walmart is backing up to your facility to pick these goods up, you need to make sure that those goods are ready to be picked up by the Walmart fleet. So there are a couple of best practices for this side, ensuring again that your team is confirming shipments by the 4 p.m. CST deadline, the day after you receive the PO. So we covered this in the last webinar. I won't go too in depth, but very, very important to know this requirement. It is 4 p.m. CST the next day, not 24 hours. And the key thing here is that to Walmart, weekends and holidays still count. So if you are receiving POs on Friday, for example, the expectation is that you're going to route them by 4 p.m. on Saturday. And if your office is closed on Saturday, then, and you route them, let's say Monday morning, you are considered out of compliance for collect ready. So you want to make sure that your team is kind of aware of these requirements and making adjustments as needed. Another really important part to the collect ready piece is making sure that there's a process in place to submit transportation portal tickets for every day that a Walmart truck doesn't show up or shows up late. This is again another really key piece that we covered in our last webinar. Many teams think that, hey, if I just submit this transportation portal ticket one time, I'm covered. Walmart's expectations are actually that you are submitting it one ticket per day for any time the Walmart truck again doesn't show up or shows up late. So really important to make sure that you are kind of checking this box. Another key part of collect ready is making sure that you are sending your supplier closing template quarterly. Again, kind of a broken record, I apologize, but we did cover this in our last webinar again. So yes, remember, you can go check it out on demand at Supplier Wiki. But the supplier closing template, just really briefly, what it does is it lets Walmart know, hey, our facilities are going to be closed for Independence Day or for Thanksgiving or for Christmas, whatever it is. So they will not send you POs during that time period so that you don't have to worry about routing on, Black Friday or whatever it is. I think we had an attendee in our last webinar actually share that Walmart has just released their Q3 supplier closing template on Retail Link. So you should be able to download that from Retail Link, fill that in, and then you would submit that typically to your replenishment manager, and they'll let you know that they've confirmed that closing. And you would do this for both kind of your office, essentially whoever's receiving the POs, and you can even do it for your warehouse if you're a collect supplier, basically telling Walmart, don't come to our facility to pick up this product during XYZ dates. So you want to make sure that you are doing that again on a quarterly basis. And then finally, you want to make sure that you're communicating with your Walmart replenishment team if there are certain carriers that are consistently causing issues. So again, kind of the thing with being a collect supplier is transportation is, really out of your hands because it is Walmart's fleet that is picking up your product. But, if there are carriers that you're seeing consistently causing issues and consistently being late or not showing up or whatever it is, you can communicate that with your replenishment manager and they can kind of work with you on a solution for that.
Hey, Stacy, we got a question based on closing.
Okay.
Last year, we closed on a Friday. However, their weekly orders that are submitted on Monday were not received. Do they take the closing by their week or just the day we list?
It should just be the date that you list. So that is kind of weird that if your weekly review day is Monday, I would expect that they would have still given you orders on Monday, even if you were closed on Friday. Because usually that's just going to talk about when you are going to receive orders. Or again, the only thing I can think of is if you had submitted the closing for your warehouse, Walmart might have said, oh, we're just not going to give you orders this week because we typically pick up on a Friday, for example. But generally it's going to be evaluated on a day-to-day basis. And even if you did not receive orders, one thing that I would check on is, did you receive a higher order the week prior or the week after? Because what Walmart does is they'll stack orders. So let's just say, for example, you guys are closed the whole week of Thanksgiving. What Walmart will do is they'll kind of stack orders the week prior to say, hey, they're not going to get any orders this week. So let's go ahead and double them up for the week prior so that it's, flowing through the system already. And even though they don't receive orders that Thanksgiving week, they still have enough in the pipeline. So generally speaking, even if you don't receive orders, check to see if you had a higher than usual or higher than expected order count the week prior.
Gotcha. Walmart always keeping us on our toes.
Thanks. Always. Oh, yeah. Okay. So the last part of, again, kind of OTIF best practices, how to be in full. So as everyone knows, being in full applies to everybody, regardless if you are prepaid or collect. Pretty straightforward. It's essentially saying if Walmart orders 100 cases, the expectation, of course, is that you're going to be shipping 100 cases or 98 if you want to, hit that 98% threshold. So best practices for how to be in full. This can be a little bit more tricky because it's a little bit more of a squishy metric in how you can make sure that you are always in full. But here are some of the best practices that we recommend. So number one is always make sure that you are reviewing and monitoring your forecasts. So Walmart has two separate forecasts that they share with suppliers. One of them is called the GRS forecast, which stands for the Global Replenishment System forecast. And that one is kind of your POS forecast. So this is what Walmart expects they are going to sell in store at the consumer level. Then they utilize the GRS forecast to build up something called the supply plan forecast. And the supply plan forecast is a supplier level forecast. So this is what Walmart expects to order from you. Generally speaking, there is usually about a 2-week lag. So whatever Walmart expects to sell 2 weeks from now is what they will plan to order from you, with a little bit of buffer, of course. They expect to sell 100 2 weeks from now, so they're going to go ahead and place 100 from you today because it will take about 2 weeks-ish to flow through the system. So generally speaking, you'll see that the supply plan and GRS forecast, again, generally will follow each other fairly closely. One thing that I want to share with the supply plan, which is really, really important, is that the supply plan, and this is in Walmart's documentation, is not a commitment to buy. So we work with a lot of supplier teams that will say, Walmart, your supply plan said 10,000 pieces, you only ordered 8, you're on the hook for 2. That is not necessarily true. Walmart wants suppliers to utilize its supply plans as guidance for what they expect to order from you. Now, of course, if there's insane discrepancies, like Walmart's supply plan said 50,000 and they only ordered 8,000, 100%, I would bring that up to your Walmart buyer and say, hey, we understand there's some buffer built into the supply plan, but this is, 4 times what we expected, and that's not reasonable. So you can definitely have those kinds of conversations, but I would say usually within plus minus 20% of the supply plan, Walmart is really not going to entertain that conversation. And one other kind of pro tip for the supply plan is Walmart actually says kind of what they recommend to do is look at the supply plan not on a week-to-week basis, but in a 4 to 6 week chunk basis. So let's just say, as an example, Walmart plans to order 100,000 units over the next 4 weeks. So, an average of 25,000 per week. Basically, Walmart is saying, if I order 100,000 the first week and 0 for the next 3 weeks, I'm still technically, in that same 100,000 over 4 week time period. So try to look at your supply plan at a longer horizon rather than on a week-to-week basis is one of the things that we've learned working with Walmart. So make sure that you're always on top of your forecasts. If you are seeing any situation, especially when you are overselling forecast, I would really pay attention to that, because if you're overselling forecast, what that means is Walmart's going to be placing more orders for your product. So you have a higher chance of running out of inventory in those cases. So I will be monitoring those forecasts at least weekly on GRS side. Supply plan, again, typically kind of on a 4 to 6 week horizon. Create supply and demand plans. So some teams that we work with will create those internally based on what Walmart is utilizing. This is, of course, a best practice. If not, many teams also just utilize forecast straight out of Walmart system. That's okay too. Update forecasts and plans as needed. So kind of an example that I mentioned, if you are overselling forecast by 50% or whatever it is, you need to work with Walmart to say, hey, we're overselling forecasts. So number 1, we're going to get hit with in-stock issues. Number 2, we need to make sure that we're adjusting our GRS forecast so that it adjusts our supply plan forecast so that we're ordering enough to kind of maintain that in stock. And then internally, you also want to make sure that you're working kind of with your planning teams to go, hey, this product is taken off in a great way, but we need to make sure that we have enough product. So when Walmart does place orders, we can still maintain that 98% in full. So that's more on the kind of forecast side. On the packaging side, so we talked about this in previous webinars, but with Walmart, receiving packages at the DCs is still a very, very manual process. They're working really hard to automate a lot of it, but right now it is still highly manual. And kind of an example of that in practice is, so you may be a supplier that sends, the same kind of item, but maybe in 2 different colors, 5 red, 5 blue. You have some guy that is doing receiving at the DC, and he's, getting thousands of cases in a day. He doesn't have time to kind of scan every single case. So he may, kind of look at the first one he sees is red. He counts 10 boxes and he goes, all right, I got 10 red, 0 blue. And so now you are dealing with overages and under or shortages. So one of the pro tips that we have with that is, obviously make sure that your packaging is as clear as possible. But we've also worked with some teams that will utilize things like stickers or labels. So, place a red sticker on all of your red boxes and a blue sticker on all of your blue boxes. Then at least, the DC teams kind of have a visual indication of what they're receiving. So that's one of the practices that we've seen be really, really successful for our teams that are dealing with kind of overage and shortages at the same time. And then kind of the last best practice for how to make sure that you're in full is make sure that you're canceling POs that you're not fulfilling and utilizing a Walmart reason code whenever possible. So we shared a list of Walmart reason codes in the last webinar. So you should be able to access those and again, try to utilize the Walmart reason code whenever you can. Okay, so I know a lot of you guys are here to really talk about the fine piece. So I want to make sure that we're spending a lot of time on that. And so we wanted to kind of address how you can talk about the fine piece with your third-party carriers or warehouses, so kind of your internal processes. And then we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how you can also address them on the Walmart side, because, you know, that's kind of where a lot of the pain is. So I'll kind of zip through this really quickly. Like Ali mentioned, we'll be sending a recording as well as the slides, because I want to make sure that we focus on the Walmart side for this one. So yeah, really quickly, if you're a prepaid supplier, very high chance that you're working with a third-party carrier or a 3PL. So a couple of kind of best practices that you can utilize with them is you always want to make sure that you are tracking carrier performance. So Walmart actually does make this information available using the carrier name column from OTIF data. We really recommend creating on-time scores for each carrier, and you can see kind of how we would calculate that below. Essentially what it is you want to create a scorecard for each of the carriers that you're utilizing, because as I kind of mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, it is your carrier's performance, but it is your OTIF fine. So kind of what we have seen work really well is when our supplier teams are sharing basically carrier scores and their non-compliant POs with the companies that they're working with. And essentially, you know, basically hold their feet to the fire a little bit and say, help us understand, you know, we made sure that we provided enough product, we provided it on time. Why aren't you holding up your end of the deal? And so you can share essentially performance issues with them, work with them to kind of understand what the root causes are, and then of course, kind of work with your partners to try and come up with a solution. So in kind of real life scenarios, we've actually seen some of our prepaid suppliers have been able to either pass fines on to their carriers. So they may go, hey, you know, I got this $10,000 fine from Walmart purely because you were late and couldn't deliver on time. And there weren't any, you know, kind of existential issues out there. We're not going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it. So we've seen some success there. We've also seen some teams, if you have kind of a longer partnership with your carrier and you don't want to make it too transactional, they'll kind of utilize that more for leverage on negotiating better terms and better rates across the different lanes. So you can utilize this data to basically have a direct impact on your bottom line. But the only way you can do this is by making sure you're assessing the performance of each of your carriers. One thing that you'll see here, as I mentioned, repeat at the bottom, and that's key because, as I'm sure all of you guys know, OTIF scores reset every single month. So it is a slightly tedious process, but you know, if you're not taking a look at this on a monthly basis, you know, there is potential information and data that you're going to miss because Walmart only keeps certain types of data for longer than 13 weeks. Usually it's on a 13-week rolling cadence for Walmart. So make sure that you're always taking a look at this data, downloading it, and basically kind of doing your due diligence on it. Here are a couple of questions that you can ask your third-party carriers and ask about your own supply chain so you can kind of help to determine what the root cause of those issues are. You know, are they primarily late or early? Did they pick up the order with enough time to deliver it? Did they schedule the appointment correctly? If they're not even scheduling it within the window, hey, that's low-hanging fruit for you guys. Did they end up missing the appointment? Were there extenuating circumstances? So on and so forth. So again, this is something that you should be really taking a look at on a monthly basis by carrier to make sure that you're capturing all of these different data points. If you are a collect supplier, you know, some teams we know utilize kind of your own internal warehouses. Some teams, again, kind of work with 3PLs. I think this best practice works for both. But essentially, if there are any kind of supplier ship point related cases, so this is essentially Walmart saying that your product was not ready when the Walmart fleet arrived, Obviously, you want to make sure that you're sharing those non-compliant POs with your warehouse teams. Ask them why the POs were not ready or why the ticket was not submitted, because sometimes Walmart will count Walmart's fleet not showing up as a supplier ship point issue. Yeah, we don't make the rules, but again, you want to make sure that tickets are being submitted, or you're understanding why your warehouses are not ready when Walmart's fleet arrives. For not in full cases that were not canceled, so we're kind of assuming that if it's canceled, the business team probably knows about it and knows why it's happening. But maybe there are situations where your warehouse team is just short shipping and not canceling. You again want to make sure that you're sharing those POs, asking your third party or even internal warehouse to review. And then if possible, ask them to share documentation around shipping for those cases. So if they're saying, oh, we shipped in full, great. Do you have a signed bill of lading so that I'm able to kind of cross-reference that and make sure that we are shipping complete? So a lot of this, it's less about the blame game and more about making sure that you can kind of determine what the root cause of issues are, because once you know what the root causes are, you can start to implement strategies to kind of make that a little bit better. So questions that you can ask again to your third-party warehouses or your own internal warehouses. Are you guys having difficulty picking and packing the order for some reason? Are there issues with supply at a particular point of origin? So we work with teams that, for example, have multiple warehouses. Are there any warehouses that stick out with particular issues? Are there any warehouses that have issues with carrier no-shows? Are tickets being submitted? Does your team know that tickets need to be submitted? Are you routing your POs on time, even if it's the weekend? So on and so forth. So again, these aren't, of course, the only questions that you guys can ask, but this is a really, really great starting point for making sure that you're asking the right questions to your teams to kind of get to the bottom of root cause issues with your, OTIF scores that are less than 98%. So yeah, essentially, when you are wanting to hold third parties accountable, really important to utilize data-driven analytics. This is kind of table stakes for any company. You want to make sure that you have proof, right? Of, hey, we're not just coming at you because we think you're not doing a good job. Here's your OTIF scores over the last, however many months. Here are all the POs that are not compliant. Help us understand what's going on here. Of course, you want to make sure that your third parties are always aware of what those issues are, communicate any of the root causes that you're finding, and then modify services as needed. So again, pass on OTIF fines, renegotiate rates, or in kind of extreme cases, make a decision on if you need to switch carriers or switch 3PLs or whatever it is. So I kind of mentioned, a couple of different options that we've seen some of our own suppliers pursue. So you can seek monetary compensation for failures. So it's again that passing of fines, receiving discounts, negotiating better rates, or again, extreme scenario, you can work with other service providers that can actually meet OTIF goals. So there are some carriers and 3PLs out there that we know of that will even guarantee a 98% compliance, and they will actually state in their contract, if we don't hit the 98% compliance, we'll eat the fine. So they're out there, a very brave statement to take in kind of the post-COVID era, but they do exist. Of course, their rates are significantly more expensive, but it's something that you guys can kind of take internally and make your decisions on trade-off, which is more important for you guys, having kind of a lower overall rate, but maybe you might have to take on OTIF fines, or you want that 98% OTIF score, willing to pay higher rates overall just to make sure that that's guaranteed. So some options out there for you. Okay, so I know I blasted through a lot of content really quickly, but like I said, I really wanted to make sure that we spent a lot of our time talking about the OTIF chargeback piece at Walmart, because that's why you guys are here. Really quickly, just to level set with you guys, we got a lot of questions around this. So what is the difference between a deduction and an OTIF fine? Because a lot of times we work with teams that kind of work with both sides. So a deduction is usually on Walmart's side, it's basically an accounts payable piece. So this is saying that, you have invoiced Walmart for a PO, and Walmart has decided that, again, valid or invalid, they've decided, oh, we did not receive everything we expected to receive, so we're going to short pay you on your invoice. So for deduction, you are invoicing Walmart and they are short paying you. Again, valid or invalid, whole other discussion, whole other webinar series. But usually you'll see these deductions come off of the check, and you'll dispute them through a portal called APDP, which stands for the Accounts Payable Dispute Portal. For OTIF fines, these are AR charges, so accounts receivable charges. So the main difference is Walmart is actually invoicing you. So a lot of times it can get really confusing because with OTIF fines, Walmart will invoice you kind of on a monthly basis. And if you don't pay it, they'll just go ahead and take it off check. So it looks like an AP deduction because it's coming off of a future check. But a lot of times, if you guys work on the AR or AP side, you may not actually see like a deduction code associated with it. Or you may see a store number 9,000 or whatever it is. That is usually a sign that it's an OTIF fine. So they're AR charges. Walmart is invoicing you. If you don't pay them, they come off of a future check. The key difference as well is that OTIF fines are disputed essentially two ways, and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit shortly. So historically, prior to I think February or March this year, the only way that OTIF fines could be disputed was through the buyer. So you actually had to reach out to the buyer, give them the list of POs that you wanted them to waive an OTIF fine for. And then from there, they would say, yes, I agree. I will waive those fines for you. And then you're fine, good to go. But just recently, again, earlier this year, they actually shared some documentation that OTIF fines can now be disputed in high radius. Kind of interesting is that the dispute button in high radius for OTIF fines has always existed. But from a practical standpoint, we've seen our suppliers submit disputes through high radius again prior to this year, and they like 100% of them failed. So again, the functionality technically existed, but for all intents and purposes, you could not actually use it. That is now different. We have actually seen our suppliers dispute OTIF fines in high radius and get paid back. So we're going to talk through that process for you guys and kind of shed a little bit of light on that. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. So a couple of things to note for disputing OTIF chargebacks. Here's a couple of best practices. So number one, you want to make sure that you are communicating issues with the Walmart team as they come up. So let me zoom out just a little bit to give you guys context, because I kind of mentioned the two different ways you can dispute OTIF today. So when Walmart is assessing OTIF fines, they essentially have kind of two phases to OTIF fines. One is a projected OTIF fine and one is an invoiced OTIF fine. And this is done on a monthly cadence. Those of you guys who are in the weeds, OTIF is always 2 weeks behind. And so kind of how they do it is in the middle of the month, every month, they are looking at basically the entire previous month's OTIF scores. So for example, we're in the middle of May right now. So the month of April for OTIF has probably just closed. And so what that means is you're going to get a projected April OTIF fine. So based on your April performance, this is what we expect your OTIF fine to be. It is not technically invoiced yet. And this again happens kind of in the middle of the month. Then what happens is 2 weeks later, so at the end of May, they'll essentially completely close April's OTIF month. And at that point, they will actually invoice you, the supplier, for the month of, in our example, April. So for this 2 week period between when your OTIF fines are projected and when they're invoiced, this is when you can actually go to your buyer and ask your projected OTIF fines to be waived. So, if they agree with you and they're like, yes, we agree, we're going to waive your fines, what happens is kind of your projected will say 0. And then once it hits your invoice date, you'll basically not get invoiced for anything. So you're not exactly disputing it per se. You are requesting, because it hasn't been invoiced, you're requesting a waiver so that they invoice you at $0. So that has always been the way that OTIF fines have worked since the inception of the program. With high radius, so the other branch of that, you utilize high radius to dispute OTIF fines that have already been invoiced. So let's just say you missed that window of opportunity, and now you want to be able to dispute the OTIF fine because it has been invoiced. You can utilize high radius. This is a fairly new process. One thing we want to share with you guys. So we are still doing a lot of exploration and learning ourselves on what Walmart is accepting as documentation, what is acceptable to them as proof, how much time you have to dispute, and all of that good stuff. Just kind of general knowledge that we've learned so far is that, again, it kind of flows through high radius. We've learned that you have a 13-month window to dispute kind of invoiced OTIF fines. We have heard some conflicting stories. Some are saying that shipping documentation is adequate to get them waived. Some are, basically disputed and agreed to. Some are saying that shipping documents are not acceptable. So we're still trying to get some clarification on that. From what we see, once you kind of hit the button in high radius, it goes off to Walmart's internal team, kind of a black box for now. Again, we're still trying to explore and figure out more facts around this. But yeah, we've seen probably about a 50 to 60% success rate so far, which is pretty good. But again, we're still learning that process. And if you guys are on the call and have had experience with disputing anything through high radius, please feel free to share that in the chat. I mentioned this in all of our webinars, but we learn from each other. Any insights that you guys have and are willing to share with your fellow suppliers is always appreciated. But yeah, so I know I kind of went a little bit on a tangent, but I wanted to clarify kind of the two branches. So again, projected OTIF fines through your buyer, and they are still accepting that, so you can still do it that way. Invoiced OTIF fines follows the new high radius process, which again, we are still exploring and learning about. So these best practices are more on the buyer side, just so you guys know. But basically, you want to make sure that you're communicating, and this is true, kind of no matter what. You want to make sure that you're communicating issues with the Walmart team as they come up. We've had discussions with Walmart buyers before where they've basically told us, like, if the first time that I'm hearing about OTIF issues is when you're asking me to waive a fine, I'm probably not going to do that because, the expectation is that you as a supplier are proactively communicating as much as possible. You always want to make sure, again, this is regardless of buyer side or high radius side, you want to document any extenuating circumstances and or Walmart issues. We say this in all of our webinars, but document. It's the best way to make sure that you're always covering yourselves, covering your bases, so that when you do need to ask for a waiver or even dispute through high radius, you essentially have all of the documentation that you need rather than having to scramble and kind of find that, on a monthly cadence. The buyer will be the primary contact. Again, this is more on kind of the buyer waiving OTIF fine side. So usually, we've heard from some teams that they try to work with actually their final decide to waive fine. Definitely not a bad thing if you're regularly communicating with a replenishment team, if you've got a good with them, can be your internal advocate. But we just wanted to clarify again that the buyers are going to be the ones that have the authority to do any of the waiving. I mentioned this earlier, the goal is to prevent the need to dispute OTIF, not to rely on OTIF disputing. Again, if you guys know anything about Walmart and trying to get money from them, it is a very tedious, painful process. So I know we kind of shared a lot of best practices at the beginning, but it's so, we want to try and help you guys hold on to every dollar possible, so that even if you are having to dispute OTIF fines, it's not a big chunk of your business and it's not going to take up a lot of your time. So Couple of other things: dispute before fines are issued. So again, if you can, try and get OTIF fines waived with your buyer first. If you're seeing success with that, we don't really see a reason to stop. Buyers are still waiving fines even with high radius in place. We kind of see high radius as like a safety net almost. So if you aren't able to get those waived with your buyers, high radius is kind of a secondary option once that OTIF fine has been invoiced. And then these are a couple of kind of those facts that I shared early on. So OTIF fines are issued around 5 weeks after the month end. It's always 1 to 2 weeks behind. So again, you have that 2 to 3 week time period to actually ask for OTIF fines to be waived. So yeah, here really quickly, guys, is the announcement that Walmart made to file a dispute for OTIF using high radius. And that is all they put. So unsurprising. So again, that's why we are doing a lot of research on this. And just so you guys know as well, obviously, once we have more information, we will probably be doing a follow-up webinar with kind of step-by-step on how to actually dispute in high radius. But I mean, we always try to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information, which is why we're just kind of sharing it informally now. And again, once we have more information, we'll probably have a more formal webinar in place. So please stay tuned for that once we have additional information. And again, if you guys have any insights, either please feel free to share in the chat, or if you guys would be open to sharing with us, that would be awesome. We could just include that information in the webinar and again, just make that better for the entire supplier community. So here really quickly, guys, is the OTIF chargeback calendar, just so you guys can see. So friendly reminder, first, Walmart utilizes a weird calendar system. So they have their own Walmart weeks. And on top of that, they have OTIF specific weeks. So don't worry about, again, having to screenshot this. We'll send you a copy of this deck. But just so you can have an idea of, so you can see, for example, the month of February for OTIF, they will invoice it on March 28th. So again, I just used the April example. So you guys should probably see your OTIF fines for April get published on May 26th, is what it says. Okay, so I'm going to zip through these really quickly, just because I know we always have a lot of questions and want to make sure that we have time for discussion. So please feel free to kind of drop them in the chat if you guys have any. But essentially, some of the kind of pro tips that we have for disputing OTIF chargebacks, and again, this is more on the buyer side. Broken record, I know, but we will share more formal learnings on the high radius side, when we have a little bit more content. Again, this is more for disputing with your buyer. So one of the things that you can say to your buyer when trying to dispute OTIF chargebacks is education. Basically letting them know that, hey, we were not aware of the Walmart OTIF process and things like that. So a couple of key caveats here is you want to make sure that you use this very sparingly. Usually this is kind of a more acceptable quote unquote excuse or reason if you're a newer supplier to Walmart. Walmart does give a grace period of 3 months, I believe, to new Walmart suppliers. So you won't even get an OTIF fine for your first 3 months because they know you're trying to get off your feet or get on your feet and start to supply to a very large retailer. But usually this is kind of a one-time get out of jail free card to say, hey, Walmart, we didn't know we had to route by 4 p.m. CST the next day. Our bad. This is what we're doing, and these are the processes that we're putting in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And again, the key here is you really only want to try and use this one time. This is definitely not something where you can, they may go, great, sure, we understand, we'll waive it. You don't want to come back to them kind of the next month and be like, oh, hey, surprise, we forgot again that we couldn't do this. So you want to make sure, again, that you're just aware of this option, but only using it very, very sparingly, preferably only once. The next thing is Walmart issues. So you can ask for OTIF fines to be waived if you are having struggles with the Walmart side. But for this one, you can kind of see here, we've highlighted documentation is key. So this makes total sense. If you are going to go to Walmart and say, we need you to waive our OTIF fines because of something you did, you want to make sure that you have kind of bulletproof documentation. So either it be prepaid, or if you're prepaid, you want to have like a proof of delivery. If you're collect, you want to have a bill of lading, et cetera, et cetera. But again, documentation is key. So you want to provide communications and efforts to address the issues as they come along, and this will go a long way. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, you don't want, if you, let's just say, continue to have issues with Walmart because they're not picking up your product or whatever it is, you don't want to stay silent on the issue. And then at the end of the month go, hey, Walmart, I need you to waive this $25,000 fine, even though I've never brought this up to you before. It can happen, of course, and if it's valid, of course, you can try and get that waived. But as you guys can imagine, social capital with buyers are very limited. So whatever you can do to make sure that you're like, hey, on a weekly basis, hey, buyer, still having this issue, here's some of the POs. We will probably be asking for your help to waive this at the end of the month, whatever it is. Once you kind of get to that time period, they'll go, oh yeah, I remember they reached out to us 4 or 5 times. They tried to fix it. They worked with my teams. It still didn't work. Fair enough. I'm going to help them waive that fine. So Walmart issues, definitely a possibility. Documentation is key. Extenuating circumstances. So this is for things like weather or unforeseeable significant events. So again, you want to have documentation. Usually, as you can kind of see on the slide, this is generally kind of a more singular case type issue. So a great example of that is, I don't know if you guys remember, but earlier this year, Walmart's fulfillment center, one of their fulfillment centers, caught on fire. Which is definitely an extenuating circumstance. So we worked with a couple of suppliers that said, hey, our POs were supposed to land at this fulfillment center, but clearly they were not able to be received. We would appreciate your help to get any OTIF fines waived on this. And just so you guys know too, a lot of times the OTIF fines are completely automated. So, you would think that Walmart would automatically know, like, of course, those POs couldn't be received, but they're just, they're such a huge organization. So a lot of times those fines will just kind of automatically be calculated. And then it's on you to go to them and say, hey, we weren't able to deliver these POs because XYZ reason, we need your help to get these waived. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the SQEP or SQEP portion. We debate how you should pronounce this all the time at the office. But really quickly, to give you guys some context, so SQEP is Walmart's newest compliance program. It stands for the Supplier Quality Excellence Program. And this is really around barcode, labeling, and shipment compliance. There's a lot of nuance into each of those pieces, but generally speaking, OTIF is basically, they want to make sure that you're getting your product on time and in full, of course. And SQEP is to make sure that the packages that arrive at Walmart arrive correctly and in one piece. And the context for this is Walmart is investing heavily in a lot of automation at their DCs. And so, as part of that, they basically wanted to make it zero touch, right? So all of the packages flow through on conveyor belts and they get scanned automatically by these crazy machines. And so, of course, your barcodes and your labels have to be intact and look good so that they can be scanned. And so kind of Walmart's thinking behind this is, if they're not correct, then some human being has to kind of stop the line, manually scan it, start the line back up, which of course kind of takes away from efficiency of the supply chain, so on and so forth. So SQEP, very big deal to Walmart. We've already started to see fines flow for suppliers. If you guys are not familiar with it, you can actually check out the SQEP dashboard in Retail Link. So it is a separate dashboard from OTIF, from decision support, from APIS, from APDP. It's a whole new dashboard that you get to track. There should be a charges tab within that dashboard, and you can see if you've gotten invoiced for SQEP fines. So I kind of mentioned, the goal, 100% accurate supply chain, defect-free products, first-time quality is kind of their goal with that program. And just so you guys know kind of the timeline that they're rolling it out. So they've officially launched, all the first 3 of 4 phases. So you can see this around PO accuracy, ASNs, barcode and labeling, and then the packaging, pallet, and load compliance. They have a final phase that they have not rolled out yet called scheduling and load compliance. They have not actually released a release date for that phase, but we'll share it kind of once we have that available. But every single one of these phases has its own fine structure attached to it. And how they do it for SQEP is by PO by case. So let's just say you have 10 non-compliant cases on a single PO, make it easy. They will fine you for that PO. Usually it's $200 of an administrative fee. And then again, just depending on the different phases, for example, for ASN, I think it's $1 per case. So you can get fined $210 for this particular PO example. So the scary thing with SQEP is that you can basically get hit 3 times by Walmart on a single PO. So you can get hit with a deduction if Walmart thinks that you did not ship in full. Then because of that not in full issue, you can get hit with an OTIF fine. And then depending on kind of, if you have any barcode issues or labeling issues on that same PO, you can also get hit with a SQEP fine. And the most frustrating thing too is that the right hand does not talk to the left hand at Walmart. So what we have found is even if, let's just say this is all on the same PO, you're able to dispute a deduction successfully on this PO and say, yeah, here's proof that I really did ship everything that you ordered. Walmart will not correct that on the OTIF and SQEP side. So you have to dispute 3 ways for these 3 different programs to get back every dollar you're owed. So yeah, it's pretty crazy right now. But yeah, if you guys have any experience again with SQEP, please feel free to drop it into the chat. Okay, so those are kind of the dates that I mentioned earlier. Some of the different dates that you guys have probably started to see fines get rolled out. SQEP fines for PO defects, ASN fines have begun already. And here's really kind of how they interplay together. So SQEP and OTIF have very similar overlap through ASN scheduling, transportation, etc., but they're technically 2 different programs. So one thing to keep in mind, as I mentioned, a PO can receive a SQEP and OTIF fine simultaneously, or from cause and effect. And then there's also the deduction piece that is kind of interplaying with that. And then one thing to note is that both are now disputable in high radius. So SQEP has always been disputable in high radius. OTIF, again, this is kind of a newer piece that we are just now seeing and still, again, kind of exploring and gathering information on. Okay, so that was a lot of information, really fast. Hopefully I did not confuse everybody, and hopefully it was helpful. But I wanted to make sure we had a couple of minutes at the end for any questions, Allie, if any.
Yeah, we got one earlier that said, if a OTIF fine has basically been billed or closed, could I go back and dispute it?
Yeah, so yes. So with the new high radius process, yes. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, with high radius, we're finding that Walmart is basically giving you a 13-month period. We don't know why it's 13 months, not 1 year or 2 years or whatever it is. 13 months, very specific. But even if you have been fined and invoiced and you have paid it, or Walmart has deducted it from a check, you can go back and try and dispute it through high radius. Again, you guys know, if you guys have been to these before, I always hate to give half answers. We're still in the learning process of exactly how you can be successful with disputing these through high radius. We know it goes through a person. So kind of just so you guys know what happens when you press the button is it goes somewhere into Walmart and it's reviewed by a human being, and you usually will actually get a response through email on whether it is approved or denied. One key point that I forgot to mention earlier is that we've actually seen pretty quick-ish resolution times for these high radius disputes. So if you guys deal with the deduction side, Walmart is like 4 to 5 months behind. With OTIF and high radius, we've seen resolution times less than a month, typically. Not always approved, but at least you get an answer on like what you need to do next. So we know 13 months is a window. You can press a button in high radius to dispute. You do obviously have to fill out some proof documentation and all that stuff, but you can. It goes through a human being, usually again, kind of 4 weeks-ish resolution time. So again, we're working on getting more hard information that we can share with you guys kind of in a webinar style format. One thing that I did want to note that is very different, the deduction process from the OTIF dispute process, is that so with deductions, you are disputing on a claim by claim basis. So it's, very, very granular, and you can say on this particular claim, I want to dispute this portion for these items and send that off. For OTIF, you are disputing the entire month's charge. So you actually have to send in, generally speaking, what we've kind of seen work-ish, is you basically have to send in an Excel file with like all of the POs that you want to dispute within that month, and essentially kind of fill in all of your proof documentation, or just, whatever it is, ASNs, shipping documents, emails from the buyer, whatever it is. But generally you want to go full list of POs, full list of documentation, and some person somewhere in Walmart is reviewing that line by line by line by line and basically saying yes, approved, or no. So that is something that we've seen. We think is going to be a bit challenging for suppliers just because of the sheer amount of work that you have to do. Because again, it's not claim by claim, it's month by month. So if you have, 500 POs, you have to go research 500 POs. So that's not so great. So that's one thing that we have seen with that.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Stacy. We did get another question. We have two about SQEP that I'm going to skip for now, but I will link a very helpful document. It's like 178 pages, and Walmart goes into detail about what they need. And I'll also link our on-demand webinar for SQEP, but that was just a caveat. Another question about OTIF is, what if you don't agree with the resolution? Are you able to continue to dispute?
Yes. So one thing we haven't seen yet is, so with the Walmart shortage disputes, the AP dispute process, you usually have essentially 3 times to try. So your initial one, and then if they come back to you, you can resubmit it twice more. With OTIF fines, we have not seen a hard stop yet. So the interesting thing is, because with shortage deductions, it's completely done programmatically. So it's all done through APDP. With high radius OTIF fines, it's done through a human being, like I mentioned. So once you dispute something, you'll get an email back. And so we have been able to kind of go back and forth. We've been working with our supplier teams because, of course, at SupplyPike, we want to try and figure out a way to automate this so you don't have to do it. But we have seen basically you can go back and forth with the Walmart /high radius /OTIF team to kind of really plead your case. We've not really seen them stop us at any point. We don't really have not really seen any penalties for continuing to fight or plead our case. But again, this is kind of early-ish in the process. So they rolled this out, I think, February or March, Allie, if I'm not mistaken. So of course with Walmart, we're 2 months into the thing. So I'm sure a lot of learnings will come out over the next few months. But yeah, like I said, we're still scoping out, but kind of long story short, we've not really seen them try to stop us and go, no, this is final. Because it's a human being, as long as you keep that communication, they've continued to respond to us, in our experience at least.
Gotcha. Thank you for that, Stacy. That was super helpful.
Yeah.
And just a reminder to everyone, this is part 3 in a 4-part series. We will be talking all about disputing. So we're going to go into the nitty-gritty of how you can dispute with your buyer or on high radius, what we know now, and hopefully get some learning from you guys. We're going to jump into an OTIF radar bonus demo. So if this is your time to jump off, that's totally fine. We thank you guys for coming, and thank you, Stacy, for running through all this awesome content. If anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to contact us. Those are our real emails. You can also go on the SupplyPike website and get in contact with some of our experts. But with that, I'll just send everybody off who is not staying for the demo, and we will get going on that. So Stacy.
Awesome. Thank you, Allie. Yeah, so really excited to kind of give you guys high level overview of OTIF radar and kind of our take on OTIF at Walmart. So really quickly, we start with our dashboard page here. A couple of things that I kind of wanted to call out for you guys is I mentioned earlier that Walmart's OTIF app only maintains 13 weeks of data, detailed data. And so if you want to actually kind of track your performance over time, over quarters, over a year, that is actually not possible unless you are downloading these files every single week. So kind of the beauty of OTIF radar is, of course, we are automatically pulling all of this data for you and storing it indefinitely. So you can really have an understanding of your compliance trends over time, as well as your fines over time. So this is really helpful if you guys are implementing any of those changes that we talked about, to be like, hey, we implemented this change in September and immediately we saw, a decrease in fines in October. So we're doing the right stuff. So just an example of one of the use cases of that. Another kind of cool thing that I wanted to show that we do a little bit differently is that we will actually project out your potential fines that we talked about. So if you wanted to ever take that buyer route of getting your OTIF fines waived, you have to kind of know what your expected fines are, which the OTIF app in Retailing doesn't do a very good job of. They kind of provide you your score and your effective cost of goods, but you still kind of have to do that calculation to actually know what you are potentially on the hook for. So we will actually show you what your potential fines are so that you kind of understand what the dollars are on the table, and you can really decide, like, do I really need to lean in this month and work hard with my buyer? Or, hey, our projected fines are $12. I'm not going to lose sleep over that, and I'll worry about the other supply chain fires that I have going on. So that is pretty cool. Other things that I wanted to show you guys are that we are also able to provide OTIF scores from different points of view. And this is not something that you can get in Retailing at all. So we are able to kind of, so just so you guys know, for the OTIF Radar app, we actually stitch and harmonize data from 6 different apps within Retailing. So one thing I always like to tell our prospects is, like, could you do this manually? Technically, yes. But it is very miserable to have to basically do a lot of VLOOKUPs and index matches to try and get the story of a single PO or how your carrier is performing or whatever it is. We automatically do that for you by carrier or point of origin, departments at Walmart, the different DCs that you're headed to, so on and so forth. So a great example of that is our carrier scorecard. So of course, this is all kind of dummy data, but you can see here for the month of November, quote unquote, these are kind of my worst performers. 100% of the 1,800 cases that I shipped through Great Plains were late, basically. So kind of the cool thing too is that you can even sort by potential fines. So this is not real data. We love CH Robinson, but just as an example, hey, CH Robinson, last month, we were hit with a fine of $22,000 because your on-time score was 56%. That's not acceptable. It's really hurting our bottom line. What can we do about this? So you can actually kind of click into individual carriers, look at their performance over time. Is it trending up, trending down? And automatically get a list of all of the different POs that particular carrier is responsible for, so you can have these really data-driven conversations. Last piece that I wanted to show you guys, and this is to do with disputing. So, a really big part of what we do here at SupplyPike. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, anytime you want to try and do disputing with your buyer, regardless if you want to do it with your buyer or even through this new high radius kind of system, you have to do a lot of research. If you guys are in this world, it's every single month looking for POs, looking for proof, trying to compare that against what you shipped, what you didn't, your ASNs, your callbacks, your tickets, so on and so forth. Kind of the beauty with OTIF Radar is software automates so much of that manual process. So we will do a lot of that work for you. So as an example, I can say, hey, show me anything that has a prepaid early delivery. So if I want to go work with CH Robinson, I can go do that. Anything with an unscheduled DC appointment, so on and so forth, or maybe an in full issue. You can basically, as you can see, very quickly filter, sort, search, however you need to, copy and paste a list of PO numbers, etc. And then when you've kind of sliced and diced it down to the POs that you actually want to go after. So let's just say, for example, these not in full POs, I actually have proof documentation that I ship them in full, or I have ASNs or whatever it is. I can actually select all of these at once and hit the create dispute documents. And what that's going to do is that's automatically going to create a packet. It's going to compile all the PO information, all of the ASN information for me. And now we even have the ability to integrate with your carriers and automatically pull back bills of lading and proofs of delivery for you by PO, so that you can kind of, again, compile this packet as you saw in 2 steps, create that packet, here it is, as an Excel file, and ship that off to your Walmart buyer, or even through the high radius process. So we have really cut down what usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to research and dig in and do all that stuff, down to about, as you guys saw, 2 to 3 minutes. So pretty powerful stuff.
That is super powerful. I always love doing these demos with you, Stacy, because I learned something new about our products. So it's so awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us. Stacy, thank you so much for running through all the content, and enjoy your Tuesdays.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.